This is a war sparked by a failed matchmaking attempt. The man was humiliated after his proposal was rejected. The woman on the city wall said he was a slave's child and unworthy of her.
Ти син рабині.
The man immediately stopped his courtship and picked up a spear, ready to attack. Sveneld tried to stop him, but the man said just one sentence, and Sveneld let go. With a roar, the spear was driven into the wooden city wall. At this moment, the Prince of Polotsk on the wall was quite upset. What was supposed to be a friendly arrangement turned into a tense standoff because of his daughter. The siege troops below lit straw, not to burn down the city wall. Their goal was to create smoke to obscure the view of the archers on the wall. The assault team raised their shields, trying to cross the bridge to approach the city gate, but they failed. Vladimir had a trump card, the Viking berserkers, his powerful allies he found in the north. This time, he planned to attack the city gate with the berserkers. To join the berserker squad, one had to first drink a potion of rage. This was the mysterious liquid in the pot. After drinking it, the warrior's fury skyrocketed. With some blood smeared on, his rage was fully unleashed, and his combat power soared. After drinking it, Vladimir felt different. Perhaps it was his first time trying it. He even experienced some adverse reactions. At this moment, the siege team had already used hooks to bring down the old city wall. Soldiers surged into the city, and Vladimir adapted to the rage, letting out a roar. The Prince of Polotsk grabbed his troublesome daughter and kissed her on the forehead. It felt like a farewell. At this point, he could only hope his daughter would escape disaster. As Vladimir entered the city, everything around him seemed to slow down. The berserkers swung their hammers, shattering shields one after another. He could almost see the details of the spear piercing through the enemy's body, crossing the skin and penetrating the heart. His first battle ended in victory in this dreamlike state. However, the two elderly people who were supposed to be a family were dealt with by Sveneld. What was supposed to be a joyous occasion turned into a tragedy. Marrying a woman who might want to kill him at any moment made Vladimir quite unique. The next step was to head to Kiev. He wanted to avenge his deceased brother Oleg. The reason was that a few days earlier, Oleg had fought with Yaropolk's soldiers over a hunted bison.
Это наша охота и наша добыча. Мы люди твоего брата!
After Oleg killed one of Yaropolk's soldiers, he was pursued by Yaropolk. Knowing he was no match for Yaropolk, he fled toward the city of Polotsk. However, the soldiers of Polotsk saw a large number of enemies approaching and immediately ordered the gates to be closed. Oleg and the villagers fleeing for safety were blocked on the small bridge outside the city. In the chaos, he and his horse were pushed off the wooden bridge, resulting in his immediate death. Thus, Yaropolk was mistakenly believed to be the murderer of Oleg, so he wanted to seek justice for Oleg's death. When Vladimir arrived to negotiate, he found the city of Kiev completely deserted. Yaropolk had not fled. He had taken all the gold and silver from Kiev to recruit troops. He knew that Kiev was easy to attack but hard to defend, so he needed to expand his forces. However, Yaropolk's wife was captured and pregnant, which forced him to go for negotiations. But just as Yaropolk was about to go upstairs for talks, assassins appeared on the stairs. They stabbed him multiple times, killing him. Vladimir was startled and rushed downstairs to embrace his brother. Despite his efforts to stop the bleeding, it was all in vain. He burst out of the room, questioning Sveneld about why this happened. Sveneld had always said they should conquer by force, not through negotiation. Although Yaropolk was dead, his loyal subordinate Warysko was let go. This action would later bring trouble to Vladimir. The next day, a cavalry unit appeared outside Kiev, led by the loyal Warysko. Warysko told the Pecheneg that he had the treasure left by Yaropolk. If they helped him kill Vladimir, the treasure would be theirs. At a distance from Kiev, Warysko ordered the troops to stop. He commanded one of his subordinates to lead a surprise attack from the river valley. The cavalry set fire to the village in the valley. Although a few civilians resisted, they were no match for the cavalry. Many civilians rushed into the city for refuge, causing the city gate to become very crowded. 2 civilians at the back were shot by the cavalry. They fell right at the city gate, preventing it from closing. 2 cavalrymen charged through the gap but were quickly cut down. Both sides began to fight for the city gate, killing each other through the occasionally opened gap. Seeing that the city gate was about to fall, a woman's scream suddenly came from the city wall. Sveneld pushed Yaropolk's wife, Irina, out. Variasko was a loyal soldier and knew that Irina carried the last of Yaropolk's bloodline. He proposed that if they returned Irina to him, he would withdraw his troops. Vladimir, however, had no intention of handing Irina over. He also saved Irina from Sveneld's knife, which laid the foundation for Irina to help him in the future. Variasko said if they were ready to negotiate, they should come to him, and then they left. Furious, Vladimir went to find the Vikings. The Vikings believed they shouldn't be called upon to deal with every enemy that came their way, and they expressed their discontent. Besides, the previous payments still hadn't been settled. Obviously, Vladimir was also penniless and couldn't find anything valuable in Kiev. He had already given away both his and his wife's jewelry, but it still wasn't enough. At that point, Irina added some of her own gold jewelry. As a result, they secured the help of a berserker. The Pecheneg were not about to give up. They had already occupied the surrounding areas of Kiev. Vladimir decided to send a portion of his men out to lure the Pecheneg to the city wall. Then they would strike back. The leader responsible for luring the enemy was named Fyodor, a former commander of Yaropolk. Outside, a group of cavalry charged toward the city wall, forming a circle and shooting arrows continuously. Next, the Pecheneg set up a makeshift siege ladder on the city wall. The assault troops kept climbing the wall, and fighting began on the ramparts. Vladimir swung his sword, sending enemies flying. The number of enemies on the wall kept increasing, and Vladimir ordered the charge. Fyodor led a small team out of the city to engage the enemy. At this point, the enemies were divided into 3 groups, both above and below the wall. There was also a group on the ladder. Seeing that the siege was hopeless, the Pecheneg began to retreat. Watching the enemy retreat, Vladimir ordered a continued attack. Fyodor led his small team to pursue the cavalry, but as the Pecheneg ran, they suddenly split to the sides, encircling the small team. Faced with the cavalry's encirclement, the small team struggled to hold their ground. Arrows flew unexpectedly, catching them off guard. Fyodor commanded his soldiers to form a shield wall, but this was not a long-term solution. The cavalry's encirclement was tightening. Arrows and spears were constantly whittling down the small team. Vladimir unleashed the Viking berserker, a fierce warrior armed with a hammer, into the fray. He single-handedly disrupted the enemy's encirclement. Neither man nor horse could withstand his mighty hammer. The horn sounded from the city wall, signaling a retreat. The wheels were ready, and Fyodor told the warriors to fall back, but the berserker was too slow and fell behind the group. The Pecheneg did not give him a chance to retreat. Several arrows struck his back, but he did not fall. Then came 2 spears. The berserker could not hold on any longer, and Fyodor stopped in his tracks. Watching his comrade kneel on the ground, he felt helpless. Vladimir on the city wall was in the same situation, only able to watch as the berserker bled out on the battlefield. The Pecheneg cavalry charged again, and the small team desperately ran toward the city wall. On the city wall, Vladimir picked up a torch, while the small team pressed against the wall. They raised their shields, and the torch ignited the wheels. The burning wheels were pushed off the city wall, rolling toward the enemy. The cavalry had no time to dodge, getting knocked down and burned. The battlefield instantly turned into a sea of flames. Vladimir won this battle, but the city walls were also burning. The fire grew stronger, and people kept trying to extinguish it with water, but it was simply too late. Just when Vladimir was in despair, it suddenly rained heavily. This timely rain made Vladimir believe he was favored by the heavens. Vladimir became the revered Grand Prince of Kiev. Although this time the heavens were on Vladimir's side, he knew in his heart the Pecheneg would not give up, and Kiev could not withstand another attack. So he decided to hand Irina over to Wawrysko in exchange for the Pecheneg withdrawal. After Wawrysko took Irina away, he turned back to face Vladimir, spreading his hands, ready to continue the slaughter. Cavalry hidden in the houses charged out, leaving Vladimir stunned. Sveneld quickly pulled him away. Facing the cavalry's chains, the other accompanying personnel were all killed. Sveneld pushed the pursuing cavalry into the river, and then the two entered a small house, jumping into a fish net. Wawrysko gave chase and swung his spear around a bit, but missed. The two hid beneath the water in the passage, and Wawrysko sensed something. He stabbed wildly with his sword through the gap, almost hitting them. Vladimir and Sveneld were also preparing to counterattack. Just as they were about to act, a horn sounded from the river. The Pecheneg heard the horn and saw the large ships on the river. Those were the Romans they could not provoke, and they hurriedly retreated. The arrival of the Romans saved Vladimir. They brought gold and silver treasures and found Vladimir. They hoped he could help suppress the rebellion in Kherson. Vladimir stared at a decorative plate, captivated by a woman depicted on it. This woman was named Anna, the sister of the Eastern Roman Emperor. Vladimir wanted her to be his wife. The Romans initially said it was impossible, absolutely impossible, but later they changed their minds because the walls of Kherson were impregnable. They did not believe Vladimir could breach them. Upon learning that Irina and Wawrysko were also hiding in Kherson, Vladimir was even more determined to take Kherson. He drew his sword and told his army to march on Kherson. Outside Kherson, Vladimir first showed respect, stating he was a friend of the Eastern Roman Emperor Basil II. Then he declared that he would not retreat until he entered the city, showing his determination. Finally, he hoped they would surrender without a fight, promising not to harm the innocent if anyone opened the gate. Next, they waited for a response from the city. Irina was on the city wall, serving as the enemy's translator. After hearing Vladimir's words, Irina sent a letter to Vladimir. The letter stated that Kherson was supplied with water through a pipeline buried in the mountains. If they could take that pipeline, the city would run out of water and would surely fall without a fight. Why did Irina tell Vladimir this information? Actually, from the moment Vladimir saved her from Sveneld, she had developed feelings for him. Wawrysko was furious upon learning this. He had been looking for a chance to avenge Yaropolk. Unexpectedly, Irina had defected, and in his anger, he kept slashing at the door with his sword. He forced Irina to swear not to see Vladimir again, or he would kill her child. Irina had no choice but to swear. Wawrysko left the city and headed for the hills, preparing to ambush Vladimir. Vladimir was busy looking for the water pipe on his map. To prevent his soldiers from losing heart, he ordered the ships to be pulled to the top of the hill. The deserters dared not flee by land because the Pecheneg were behind them. Just as Vladimir was confused, Sveneld spotted a group of uninvited guests. Leading the Pecheneg cavalry was Wawrysko, who threatened to kill Vladimir. The battle was about to begin. At that moment, the clear sky suddenly turned dark with clouds, and thunder and rain began to pour, just like the timely rain that fell during the burning of Kiev. The rain was Vladimir's luck. He turned and saw the ships, coming up with a good idea. At this point, the Pecheneg cavalry had already begun their charge, but Vladimir led his men to run back, while Sveneld and some of his men engaged the cavalry. The ships successfully removed their moorings, but for these few men, the large ships were too heavy. They exerted all their strength, but the ships remained still. The front team was already suppressed, and it looked like they would be completely wiped out. Just as Vladimir vented his anger at the ship, a group of Vikings arrived. Seeing his comrades fighting bravely on the battlefield, the Vikings roared, and the ship finally moved. They turned the bow down the hill. Meanwhile, Sveneld was in a tough battle. There were too many enemies, and he was running out of strength. Having his sword knocked away and falling to the muddy ground, Sveneld could only crawl. An enemy mounted on him tried to end his life. At this critical moment, a comrade saved Sveneld. The large ship finally began to move, sliding rapidly down the hill. Everyone boarded the ship, but Vladimir fell and couldn't get on. Wawrysko saw Vladimir between the two rapidly sliding ships. He quickly dismounted and ran up the hill. For him, everyone else was unimportant. Killing Vladimir was his top priority. Under the charge of the warship, the cavalry was no match. The Vikings slaughtered their way through, and the tide of battle turned instantly. The Pecheneg have been defeated. After defeating the enemy, Sveneld saw a figure running up the hill. At this moment, Wawrysko was very close to Vladimir. Vladimir hurt his leg from a previous fall, making it difficult for him to stand. A warrior suddenly charged out, trying to stop Wawrysko. They had been comrades in arms, and he advised Wawrysko to stop fighting and that it was over. Wawrysko replied that he had no home left. His only purpose was to kill Vladimir, to avenge Yaropolk. The two could not come to an agreement and drew their swords. The warrior was no match for Wawrysko. He was quickly pushed down, but he did not give up and continued to attack from behind. His axe swung twice before being knocked away, followed by an arrow piercing his heart. Wawrysko killed his former comrade, roaring as he sent off his old friend, continuing his quest for revenge. At this moment, Vladimir took advantage of Yaropolk's roar to stealthily grab a stone. He pretended to be exhausted and knelt down, seemingly ready to give up. Sveneld rushed over, and Yaropolk told Sveneld to watch as he killed Vladimir. Before he could finish speaking, Vladimir gathered his strength and smashed the stone into Yaropolk's chin. The chin is a vulnerable part of the body, and being hit, Yaropolk collapsed. The battle ended, and the rain stopped. Yaropolk was bound, and he kept saying that Vladimir had killed his brother Yaropolk. Vladimir denied it. He hadn't killed Yaropolk. The sword struck Yaropolk's body but did not cut through his armor. Vladimir kicked Yaropolk down the hill, leaving him to fend for himself. The soldiers finally found the water pipe, cheering with joy. Relying on the water source, Vladimir easily took Kherson, with countless treasures laid before them. The soldiers cheered for victory, but Vladimir went to a church. He wanted to ask the priest about Irina's whereabouts, but there was no answer. The priest knew that Vladimir was about to marry Anna, the princess of the Eastern Roman Empire. Seeing Vladimir interested in the church's murals, the priest hoped Vladimir would repent. After a moment of consideration, Vladimir confessed his sins. Indeed, it was Vladimir who ordered the elimination of Yaropolk, just as Yaropolk had said. He also personally ordered the killing of his wife's parents. Recalling these events made Vladimir weep bitterly. It was all his fault, and so many soldiers had died. Whose fault could it be but his? The priest gave him a bowl of oily water, representing all the sins Vladimir had committed. After the oil floating on top was ignited and extinguished, Vladimir drank it, severing ties with his past. The Eastern Roman Emperor kept his promise and married his sister Anna to Vladimir.